The solution to your problems can be found in your story. And I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you very much for taking your precious time to watch this video. And I would like to take another opportunity to talk about one of the legends of reggae music, famously known as the world's ambassador of reggae music. He was not only famous amongst reggae lovers, but he was also famous amongst many of the black people all over the world and amongst many people in the world in general. February 6, 1945, today, Bob Marley was born. And someone might ask, why should we even talk about Bob Marley? Because in this channel, we talk about history, we talk about our struggles, we talk about a lot of things. Why should we even talk about Bob Marley? It's because when it comes to reggae music is not just that type of music to entertain you or to make you feel good. But reggae music is that type of music that will educate you about who you are, your identity, your culture, your roots, your history, and it will also console you. So in other words, when it comes to the roots of reggae music or the foundation of reggae music was all about consoling those who were going through struggle, the captives, the slaves, and many others who were hustling at that time and who are still hustling even today. It's all about knowing who you are. Why Bob Marley? Is because Bob Marley is also a freedom fighter, or was also a freedom fighter. Even today, his music is still here to awaken us. But the mistake that many people make is that they only listen reggae music for entertainment, but not for identical purposes or historical purposes. Because reggae music is all about making you to understand who you are. Because when you talk about content creation, is not something new. Back then, we had many artists who used their content. It can be reggae music or other types of music to talk about history, to talk about what they were going through, and to talk about a lot of things. So Bob Marley was one of those musicians, was one of those content creators who used his content or his ability to sing, to deliver a message to us. And you have to understand that when it comes to reggae music, this is the type of music that is hated by the colonizer. And you have to understand that if something is hated by the colonizer, you have to ask yourself why. It's because it's rich when it comes to history, when it comes to identity, when it comes to knowing your culture, when it comes to understanding where you come from. So now reggae music is doing what is opposite from what the system wants, because the system wants you to forget about who you are and where you come from. So that is why in countries like South Africa, the music of reggae was banned. There are songs of reggae that were banned. For an example, when it comes to Bob Marley, we can talk about the Babylon System, Exodus, Zimbabwe, and many other songs, even the Redemption song. During the apartheid system here in South Africa, those songs were banned. Why? It's because the aim or the objective of the colonizer is to make sure that you forget about your history, you forget about who you are. So that is why some of these songs were banned. And that is why whenever they will feel like they want you to believe that they love reggae music, they will only focus on the entertainment part of reggae music. They will never teach you about the main content, the roots of reggae music. So when we talk about Bob Marley, we are actually talking about a legend, someone who sacrificed his life for many of us. That is why he is the freedom fighter, because he used his content, he used his music to fight against the system. So he's one of those musicians who also held the system by its horns. Why do I say this? It would be important for us to go through his music. For an example, one of his songs, the famous one, Redemption Song. It's important for us to focus on the lyrics. Maybe I would like to move on to this famous line. This line was very, very famous. Even today is still very famous. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. And again, these are the words that were also mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, by Marcus Garvey. Why these words are so important, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, is because when the colonizer wants to control you, the first thing that they want to capture your minds, because they've already captured your bodies. In other words, they've already captured your physical body. So the next thing that they need to capture now is your thinking capacity, or how you think, how you decide, how you do things. In other words, how you analyze yourself. In other words, according to the system, you have to doubt yourself. In other words, you should not even believe in yourself, because now you have to believe in the system. You have to depend in the system, or you have to depend upon the system. That is why here in South Africa, there are many people who say apartheid was better. Yes, I understand the current situation, that we are going through rough times. But to say apartheid was better, that's a sign that when a colonizer takes over, it's not only about your body, but it's also about capturing your mind. Because when your mind is captured, it will be easy for you to say, you know what, I remember the colonizer. The colonizer was better. And that is why Bob Marley was like, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. In other words, you cannot expect the colonizer to free your mind, because the colonizer doesn't care. You cannot expect the colonizer to share his freedom together with you. You cannot expect the colonizer to share your assets together with you. In other words, the colonizer wants to take from you. So that is why Bob Marley was like, none but ourselves can free our mind. So that is why many of these musicians, reggae musicians to be exact, they took it upon themselves to risk their lives so that they can send this beautiful message to us, so that we can remember who we are. And he was like, have no fear for atomic energy, because none of them can stop the time. So in other words, at the end of the day, you have to understand that everything has its own time. They can have everything. They can have all these. They can have the highest technology ever. But at the end of the day, the Babylon or the Babylon system will collapse, irregardless of whatever they have. So this song, which is the redemption song, indeed is the song of freedom. And that is why we regard Bob Marley as a freedom fighter. And again, we have another song, which is Babylon System. It's one of the famous songs, and many people may be familiar with the Babylon System. We refuse to be what you wanted us to be. You have to understand that when the system captures you, they want to control you. They want you to think in a certain way. They want you to move in a certain way. They want you to praise the colonizer. They want you to In other words, to copy the lifestyle of the colonizer, to think like the colonizer, so that at the end of the day, you can forget your identity, so that at the end of the day, you can forget your roots, so that at the end of the day, you can forget who you are. So this is the strategy of the colonizer. In other words, the objective of the colonizer. So that is why Bob Marley was like, we refuse to be what you wanted us to be. We are what we are. That's the way it's going to be. If you don't know, you can't educate I. For no equal opportunity, talking about my freedom. In other words, this song is a very beautiful song. You can just maybe go and listen to this song, and you're gonna enjoy it, and you will start to know that it is very important to know your story. In other words, in this song, he regards the Babylon system as the vampire. The Babylon system as the vampire. Just imagine, do you think a vampire can rescue you? Do you think a vampire can care about you? You think a vampire can give you freedom? Absolutely not. Because when it comes to reggae music, we have a lot to talk about. Because if you listen to one song or one of the songs of reggae music, sometimes you can even write a full essay or a 10-page essay with that particular one song. So Bob Marley has recorded multiple songs. We can talk about Zimbabwe, where he talked about the struggles of Zimbabwe, what the people of Zimbabwe were going through at that time. And again, we can also talk about Exodus. If you listen to Exodus, it will like take you deep into your roots, into your history, and know where you come from, so that you can understand that when we talk about the Babylon system, what are we actually talking about? When we talk about the mystery Babylon, what are we actually talking about? Bob Marley is a freedom fighter. I've been listening to reggae music for decades, since I was young, since I was 10 years or 11 years old. I'm still listening to reggae music because it's always encouraging me to know about my identity. I use some of these songs to make my own research so that I can understand our history, so that I can understand our culture, our heritage. So that is why I regard Bob Marley as one of the greatest freedom fighters of all times.